Okay, well, I'm actually a physicist by training, and I've done quite a lot, nevertheless, in acoustics, which is just another branch of physics. As I'm also a fellow of the Institute of Engineering and Technology, I can talk as a professional on the electrical engineering aspects as well as the acoustic aspects of wind farm. Other than that, I have merely lay opinions, like on what they look like, for example. But when it comes to what they sound like, I know what I'm talking about, and I talk about it objectively. Now, wind energy is really still in its childhood. It's been going a decade, so that's all. And offshore wind energy then is in its infancy. And so a good place to start, I feel, is to talk a little bit about onshore, see where we are onshore. And what I'm going to talk about now is the fact that onshore wind farms has been the cause of thousands of noise complaints across the country from wind farm neighbours, and these are mostly complaints about sleep disturbance. They're not just moaning about the loss of rural tranquility, they're complaining that they're kept awake maybe 4 or 5 hours during the night. Not every night, of course, but it doesn't take very many nights to wreck your life. Now, it doesn't mean that all onshore wind farms disturb sleep. They certainly don't. And if they comply with government noise standards, which essentially means they're far enough away from turbines, there is usually no problem. The noise standards are adequate. Kessingland, though, is the wind farm that actually tops, it's onshore, obviously, and it's the one that tops the complaints record, and at the moment they have got over 400 complaints in all. There's quite a lot of noise complaints from one wind farm, comprising just 2 megawatt turbines. And I think we've got to accept that as most of the residents did not object, well, most of the complaining residents, that is, did not object before the wind farm was built, that they're not meaningless complaints, they're not just being awkward. And certainly the way the district council accept that, because they have declared that it is a statutory nuisance, that wind farm, a statutory noise nuisance. Hopefully that does mean there'll be something done about it. I'm working myself now on a belated noise prediction. It's strange to predict something that's already happening, but that's what I'm having to do. So it is a bad situation there, but I'm not saying it's typical. Most of the wind farms are far enough away from housing not to be a problem. Now, the important point is that offshore wind is different. Navitus Bay is obviously offshore, and it's got rather more than 2 turbines. I've just taken the one example of 121 of the 8 megawatt turbines for the work I've done. The other ways of achieving that, which Navitus Bay company have proposed, all give similar noise levels, because noise is more or less proportional to power. And the power here is just under a gigawatt, isn't it? 121 times 8 megawatts is a little under a gigawatt. No complaints about noise yet, unlike Kessingland, but plenty of concerns, I think. Let's just look at the ratios between the two. Navitus Bay, we've got 30 times the distance from houses, but we've got 242 times as much power. That's a lot, and power is proportional to noise, so we've got 242 times as much noise. And the real question that we've got to answer now then is, would it be a statutory noise nuisance? Now, what does that depend on? Well, it depends on how the noise varies as you go away from the turbine. At the moment, we don't know how that happens. We will do very soon. We need a red balloon to determine it. And in the middle of my balloon, I've got a tiny wind turbine. And I hope you can see, you can see there, there's a little black square, 1 centimetre square. And I'm going to inflate that balloon without sound effects. And it is now a 2 centimetre by 2 centimetre square, so its area has increased 4-fold. Get rid of it. Nice, wasn't it? So what we find, in fact, is that because the noise that was going on to that larger expanded balloon, although it was only twice as far away from our tiny wind turbine, was 4 times the area, and therefore only a quarter of the noise per unit area. So that's what we call the inverse square law. The noise decreases every time you double the distance by a factor of 4, not by a factor of 2, but by a factor of 4. Okay, we've got that. Doubling the distance reduces noise by a factor of 4, not just 2. So let's now compare the two situations. We've got Yelland versus Navitus Bay, and we've already had that figure, 30 times the distance, but I said inverse square law, so it's not 30 times quieter, it's 30 squared, which is 900 times quieter. So if we say it's 900 times quieter due to being further away, and only 242 times noisier than the Yelland ones, then we're obviously only going to have a quarter of the noise level. And according to my own sums, the reason there are problems at Yelland is because that is about a factor of 4 or so over the permitted noise level. And what that tells me, and I hope tells you, is there should be no problem. So would it be a statutory noise nuisance? Apparently not. But, and it's a big but, offshore is different. It's fundamentally different for reasons that Bill's already touched on. The first one is reflection. It sounds reflected by a hard surface, very much as a mirror reflects light. One of the best reflectors for sound, and I mean the best, it's better than tarmac, better than concrete, and that's water and ice. They reflect practically 100%, 99% we've got here. I think it's more than that in reality. Now, this is the difference, because onshore wind farms are usually built on soft, porous farmland, which absorbs most of the sound, not all of it, but certainly more than half of it. And that is a fundamental difference. Second fundamental difference, refraction. What on earth is refraction? Anyone that's done O-level physics might sort of go back and think, sorry, I should say GCSE physics. Let's talk a little bit about refraction. We have to start by talking about wind shear. Now, if you look at just those arrows up there, that indicates what wind shear is. As you go to a higher altitude above the sea or the land, the wind goes faster. It's because the earth has friction with the air, slows down the wind. And wind shear just means you get more wind high up than you do low down. And that's very important. And that's not an unusual situation. That's absolutely standard. Now, this has an effect on the propagation, which we'll see in the next slide. But what I want to point out here is that this gentleman here is Professor Osborne Reynolds, published some excellent papers on this in the 1870s, quite a long time ago. So it's not a new phenomenon by any means, not a new discovery or a new theory. It's very well established. And as well as these excellent papers, they have some quite nice. That's the first page of one of them. And I'm not going to read all that, but I will read this bit. The wind tends to lift the sound proceeding against it and to bring down that which is travelling with it. And I just like that. And I like also Professor Reynolds' way of illustrating it. First of all, wind shear, you can see there's 4 pennants of varying droopiness. And if you look at all those semicircular wavefronts, they're not quite semicircular. Were there no wind, those wavefronts would all be just nice semicircles centred on his noise machine. And the noise machine, by the way, is a bell in a wooden box full of the Clanchet cells, I believe, which are ancient batteries. What you notice, though, is that these are all biased towards the right. And the reason they're all biased towards the right is because the wind speed adds to the speed of sound. And don't ever listen to any nonsense about the wind blowing the sound. It can't blow the sound. The speed of sound is about 700 and something miles an hour. The force 4 is about 13, 14 miles an hour. Huge difference. what the wind can do is steer the sound. It doesn't blow it, but it can steer it. And downwind, it steers it that way, and upwind, it steers it that way. And you can even have areas of silence not far upwind of a source of noise, be it a wind turbine or an ancient bell. Now that is interesting. I didn't press the button. So that was the next slide. Here we've still got wind shear, and what I want to point out is the third big difference, which is the difference of scale. We're all well aware of the fact that Navitus Bay wind farm is much bigger than any onshore wind farm. And scale matters because I'm talking about refraction and reflection and all the rest of it, which is illustrated over there. But if this were an onshore wind farm on the same scale, then the houses would be somewhere around here, the nearest houses. And you would more or less just get straight lines, sound radiated from one turbine. There's not much effect from reflection and really no effect from refraction. It hasn't had a chance to come in yet. But if you look at it on an offshore scale, which is 15 kilometres, say, from left to right there, then the sort of thing that happens is that the sound gets refracted, curving round, hits the sea, bounces up again, angle of incidence equal to angle of reflection, and again it goes on until it reaches the shore. And all the sound that's coming out of some particular angle there, including anything incidentally that comes down that way as well and gets reflected, will get channeled. And so you get this effect that the sound is actually not spreading all round uniformly, but it's being channeled into a cylinder, a very flat cylinder. And that makes a huge difference, because if we go back to our little red balloon, then we can only expand that in one direction. It doesn't get any bigger that way. And so our 2 by 2 square has become a 2 by 1 rectangle. So that means that we get much less attenuation of sound. Now this is geometric divergence, or you can also call it spreading, which is a bit easier. Spherical spreading, which is what you get from an onshore wind farm. Back to school, I hope to make it clearer, maybe not, I don't know. But the surface area of the sphere we know is 4 pi r squared, so hence the inverse square law. Go on to the next one, which is cylindrical spreading. The surface area of a cylinder is 2 pi r h, and so it's just proportional to the inverse of the distance in the square, which is what we said before. And if you want it in dBs, then it's you lose 6 dBs per doubling of the distance on the spherical bit. But if you're talking about cylindrical spreading, it's down to 3 dBs per doubling of the distance. And that is a huge difference. That's a nice theory, isn't it? Well, I think it is. Has it been proved at all? That's what matters. Has anyone done any measurements to prove it? And the answer is most definitely yes. Scandinavia's leading technical university, which is roughly translated the King's High School of Technology or something. And it's a very well-reputed university. It's the Swedish equivalent of Oxbridge, Brunel, whatever. What they've done over a period of many years is what amounts to a quantitative proof of the theory of cylindrical spreading. And this is the chart from their paper. Here we've got it's not the North Sea, it's an area of sea that goes up into the bits of the countries. And I think it's probably Norway actually, not Sweden. And it's a Kalmar. So there we've got a disused lighthouse with a huge, very high power loudspeaker on it. And we've got a 9 kilometre setback. I didn't touch the button. We've got a 9 kilometre setback, and there is a microphone array. And they actually did the experiment to find out whether there was cylindrical spreading. And what they found was, yes, there is cylindrical spreading, and it appears to start or become significant, I should say, at 700 metres. In other words, they got the right answers to their calculations if they assumed spherical spreading for 700 metres and then cylindrical spreading thereafter. for the rest of the 9 kilometres. So there is a very elegant proof there, and this wasn't funded by objectors or by the wind industry, it was funded by the Swedish government. Now, the next question I'd like to ask is, has anyone else ever used cylindrical divergence, cylindrical spreading before? And the answer is yes, they have. Well, they haven't used it because they gave up in the end, didn't they? It's the Atlantic array. But they most certainly did use hemispherical spreading for the first 2 kilometres, not the first 700 metres. Other people have used it for the first 200 metres. So it's a little uncertain where it comes in. But 700 metres is a good compromise. And I just emphasise that last bit there. It's very significant that it's not just me that's saying, oh, you should be looking at cylindrical spreading. It's me that's saying you should be using it because other people are. Now, does the Navitus Bay noise impact assessment, and there is one, does it use cylindrical spreading? And the answer is no. And why does it not use cylindrical spreading? Well, there wouldn't be as many turbines, or it would have to be further away, obviously. But the reason it doesn't use cylindrical spreading is because they've effectively taken the wrong standard, I'm afraid. They've taken a very good standard, which is ISO 9613-2, which is the standard sanctioned by our government for onshore wind farms. It's not sanctioned for offshore wind farms for the very good reasons I've just been describing. And what is a little surprising to me is that, I don't know if you can read that, not terribly good, but it says the very first paragraph in that standard, scope, conditions over water surfaces are not covered and may result in the wrong answer. What's that effect? So they have used a standard, the first paragraph of which says, please don't use near the water. Now, as far as noise predictions are concerned, I was commissioned, as you know, to do a noise impact assessment, and I've done one for the original, not the original, I think it was after the first downsizing, and then they downsized again, so I had to do it again. But I'll just, I don't know if I've got the answers here, but I might read them out. No, I haven't, so I'll just quickly read out the figures. Now, the target we've got is 35 dBA, and I've got to say that I consider the Navitus Bay company's noise assessment to be, the way it's reported is a little bit thin. But nevertheless, I've got to say that I come out with the same, very close to the same answers as they do, provided that I use spherical spreading, which is wrong. So I'm not criticising it really in any other way than the fact that it's used the wrong standard and the wrong spreading. Now, the noise predictions I've come up with now, since the downsizing, are that at Durlston there will be a 7.1 dB excess beyond the government's 35 dBA limit. On the Isle of Wight, there will be a 4.7 dB excess, and here at Bournemouth there will be a 4.2 dB excess of the 35 dBA government maximum limit. Now, so what I've got to say then is that the predicted emission noise are well above the allowed limit, which is imposed by a government standard called ETSU R97 that many of you, especially here anyway, will be aware of. To meet that limit would need a significant reduction in the number of turbines and or a major increase in the setback distance. And I really think that the EU 23 kilometre minimum setback recommendation, it was not a round number picked out of the air, and I firmly believe that to ignore it is reckless, and 15 is quite a lot less than 23. And I do fear that Bournemouth and Brighton risk becoming guinea pigs for what really is a whole new concept. It's the world's biggest offshore wind farms. I did say Bournemouth and Brighton, yes, because there's a very similar application there, the Rampion wind farm. they risk becoming guinea pigs for a whole new concept, which is huge wind farms just 15 kilometres from downwind, densely populated shorelines which are deeply engaged in the tourist industry. And we've got nothing like that around our shores at the moment. We've got smaller wind farms off desolate coasts on the west side of the country, very low population densities, and on the other side then there are smaller wind farms again, rather closer, but there again, they're generally speaking, the turbines are downwind of the houses instead of vice versa. And that's really what I want to say, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Yelland. Before